The late afternoon sun slanted through the curtains of my father's study, spilling thin beams across the desk he had kept untouched for years. Dust clung to the carved wood, and the smell of old paper hung heavy in the air. I hadn't sat in that chair since the funeral. Even now, my fingers hesitated before pulling the drawer open, as if I might disturb his presence still lingering in the room. I was searching for nothing in particular, just the comfort of handling his belongings, the traces of handwriting on faded notes, the paper clips he always bent out of shape when he was thinking. That's when I saw it, a crisp white envelope lying flat beneath a pile of yellowed receipts. My name was typed neatly on the front, but something about it stopped me cold. The spelling wasn't quite right. One letter misplaced, as though someone had tried to imitate familiarity, but fell just short. My heart gave a small jolt. I slit the envelope open carefully and slid out the pages inside. Legal language filled the first sheet, heavy with formality and numbers. It took a moment for the meaning to register. According to this document, I had agreed to sell a portion of the land my father left behind. The signature at the bottom, it looked exactly like mine. But I had never signed these papers. I leaned closer, tracing the curves of the ink with my eyes. The first A was too rounded, the tail of the R too sharp. It mimicked me almost perfectly, yet the small imperfections screamed wrong. My fingers tightened, and the page trembled as though my own body refused to accept what it was seeing. I read the date twice, then 3 times. The contract was filed only a month after my father's passing. That was the week I had barely been able to get out of bed, drowning in grief. Signing documents was the last thing I could have done. A slow chill spread through me, heavier than the silence pressing in from the empty room. I dropped the paper onto the desk and stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. The thought clawed at me, who would have done this? And more importantly, who stood to gain? Only one name came to mind, though I resisted letting it settle. My brother, James. He had been restless since the funeral, pushing to handle the estate quickly, as he put it. I remembered the way he avoided my eyes when I said I wasn't ready. I remembered his voice, tight with urgency, telling me that delays would cost us money. At the time, I thought it was grief making him impatient. Now, I wasn't so sure. I forced myself to sit again, laying the papers flat, scanning every line. The land in question wasn't just property. It was the field where our father used to take us as children, teaching us to plant rows of vegetables and chase away crows. It was more than soil, it was memory, roots, identity. And here it was, sold off, as if none of that mattered. As if I had been erased from the decision entirely. My hands shook as I reached for my phone. Should I call James immediately? Should I call a lawyer first? The thought of accusing my own brother felt unbearable, but so did the thought of doing nothing. I stood again, pacing the small room, my shoes whispering against the wooden floorboards. I stopped at the window, staring out at the fading light as the day gave way to dusk. The shadows grew longer, and the unease in my chest deepened with them. Somewhere, someone was counting on me not to notice. Someone believed I wouldn't fight. I turned back to the desk, the forged signature glaring at me like a challenge. For the first time, I realized that my father's death had not only left me grieving, it had left me vulnerable. And someone close to me had taken advantage of that. I pressed my palm flat against the paper, steadying myself. My brother's face flickered in my mind, his smile at the funeral reception, his sudden kindness, the way he insisted on handling the documents. How much of it had been real, and how much had been strategy? The air in the room felt heavier by the second. I knew I couldn't ignore this, but the question gnawed at me until my stomach turned. If James truly forged my signature, what else had he stolen from me without my knowledge? The next morning, I walked into the law office listed on the letter. The receptionist gave me a polite smile, but I could hear the doubt in her voice when I asked for copies of the contract I had signed. A short wait later, a man in a dark suit appeared, holding a folder. He introduced himself as Mr. Harris, the lawyer who had handled the sale. He spread the documents across the table in a quiet conference room. There it was again, my name, my handwriting. For a moment, I almost doubted myself. Could grief have blurred my memory so badly? But no. I knew every paper I had touched since my father's death. These weren't mine. I leaned in, studying every curve of the signature. Mr. Harris adjusted his glasses, watching me. "Is something wrong, Ms. Alara?" he asked. His tone was careful, as though he already knew the answer. "That isn't mine," I said flatly. My voice shook, but the words were firm. "I never signed this." His brows knit together. "Your brother assured me you had. He said you were too overwhelmed to handle the paperwork directly, but you had given him power of attorney." I froze. Power of attorney? My father had mentioned it once, years ago, but we never filed the forms. My pulse raced. If James had told them I had, then he had lied, and lied convincingly enough to convince a lawyer. I asked for copies, and Mr. Harris hesitated before finally sliding them across the table. "You'll need to resolve this with your brother," he said, his voice clipped. "As far as our office is concerned, the matter is closed." I walked out gripping the folder so tightly the edges cut into my palm. Outside, the city noise clashed with the pounding in my head. By the time I reached James's house, my anger had overtaken the shock. He opened the door, casual as ever, sipping from a mug. "Alara," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You look upset." I shoved the papers toward him. "Care to explain this?" For a flicker of a second, his smile dropped. Then he chuckled softly, shaking his head. "You're overreacting. It's just business. I handled it for both of us. That's not your signature, James. It's mine. Or at least, you tried to make it look like mine." His eyes hardened. "You think you can prove that? Don't be naive." The silence stretched, thick with tension. My stomach twisted, but I didn't back down. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "If you're smart, you'll stop digging. Some things are better left alone." His warning echoed in my head long after I left his doorstep. What was he hiding that made him this desperate to shut me up? The warning replayed in my mind with every step I took. But fear quickly hardened into resolve. That night, I spread the papers across my kitchen table and stared at them until my eyes burned. Every stroke of the forged signature mocked me. If James thought I would back down, he was wrong. The next morning, I contacted a handwriting expert. Sitting in her office, I watched as she compared my genuine signatures with the ones on the documents. She traced each curve slowly, nodding with growing certainty. "This isn't your handwriting," she said firmly. "Someone tried to imitate you, but the pressure and rhythm don't match." She typed up a report, her words clinical but undeniable. I left with a mix of relief and dread. Relief because I finally had proof. Dread because I knew what it meant. My own brother had deliberately crossed a line he could never uncross. With the report in hand, I met with a lawyer of my own, Ms. Reynolds. She listened carefully, flipping through the papers with sharp eyes. "This isn't just forgery," she said. "It's fraud. If we file this in court, the sale could be reversed. But you need to be prepared. Your brother won't go down without a fight." The thought of facing James in a courtroom made my chest tighten, but I nodded. "Do it," I said. My voice was steadier than I felt. A week later, the first filings were submitted. James was served with notice. That evening, he showed up at my door, his face dark with anger. He didn't bother with pleasantries. "You're dragging this into court," he demanded. "Over what?" "A piece of dirt." I held my ground. "It's not just land. It's our father's legacy. And you forged my name." For a second, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought he might strike me. Instead, he laughed bitterly. "You think you're protecting his legacy? You have no idea what you're dealing with." His words rattled me, but they also confirmed something I had suspected. This wasn't only about land or money. There was more he was hiding. The next day, Ms. Reynolds called with new information. During discovery, she had obtained records of James's bank accounts. The numbers were shocking: loans, overdue bills, and payments to places I didn't recognize. "Your brother isn't just careless," she said. "He's drowning in debt. And this land sale was only the beginning. He was planning to liquidate everything your father left behind." I felt my breath catch. The betrayal was deeper than I ever imagined. This wasn't desperation in the moment. This was a calculated plan to strip me of everything, quietly, piece by piece. If I didn't stop him now, what else would James take before it was too late? The courtroom felt colder than I expected. Wooden benches lined the space, and the echo of footsteps carried as lawyers shuffled papers and whispered strategy. I sat beside Ms. Reynolds, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. Across the aisle, James avoided my eyes, pretending to be absorbed in his phone. But I saw the tension in his jaw, the way his foot tapped nervously against the floor. When the judge entered, silence fell heavy. My heart pounded as the documents were introduced. The handwriting expert spoke first, explaining every subtle difference that proved the signatures weren't mine. She pointed to pressure marks, unnatural pen lifts, and inconsistencies no genuine hand could make. Her words were clear, steady, undeniable. James's lawyer tried to argue that grief had made me forget, that perhaps I had signed under stress and simply didn't recall. But when Ms. Reynolds handed the court copies of James's financial records, the truth began to unravel. The debts, the hidden loans, the trail of desperation, it all painted a picture too sharp to ignore. Finally, the judge turned to James. "Did you forge your sister's signature?" His voice cut through the room like steel. James's face flushed. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he muttered, "I did what I had to do." The judge's gavel came down hard. The sale was voided, the land restored to me, and James was ordered to face charges for fraud. A weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying slipped from my chest, leaving me lighter, stronger. For the first time since my father's passing, I felt like I was protecting his memory, not just surviving it. As we left the courthouse, reporters hovered outside, their voices buzzing with questions. I ignored them, focusing on the crisp air, the sound of leaves crunching underfoot, the relief settling deep into my bones. Ms. Reynolds smiled. "You stood up for yourself. That's what your father would have wanted." I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. I didn't let him take everything. But as I turned the corner, James appeared, waiting in the shadow of the building. His suit was wrinkled, his expression tight with bitterness. He stepped close enough that only I could hear him. "You won the land," he said quietly. "But you'll see soon enough. My debts don't disappear. They'll come looking. And when they do, they won't care whose name is on the deed." His words sank into me like ice. I walked away, refusing to look back, but the chill stayed with me. The land was mine again, and so was my strength. Yet I couldn't ignore the truth. James hadn't just betrayed me. He had dragged danger straight to my door.